Prologue. On the Edge of the Storm. Sometimes, at 3 in the morning, I wake from dreams of another life, a life before secrets and suspicion, before I hired a stranger to look for ghosts in my marriage. The house is silent, except for the faint tick of the old clock in the hallway and the whisper of rain against the window. Emily's side of the bed is cold. Max, our golden retriever, snores at my feet, a comforting weight that doesn't quite fill the emptiness. I wonder, not for the first time, when exactly I stopped believing in us. Was it a text I wasn't meant to see, or the way her laughter began to sound like a stranger's? Or maybe it was 1,000 small things, a late-night call, the quiet click of a bathroom door, the absence of her perfume on my shirt. There are stories about betrayal, how it crashes in, shattering the world in a single brutal blow. But I know the truth now. Sometimes betrayal is slow as dawn, creeping in until you look up one morning and realize everything has changed. I used to believe love could fix anything, but love, I'm learning, can also be a blindfold. Chapter 1. Rain in Boston. Boston in late autumn is a city made for secrets. Gray skies, narrow streets, a constant hush of rain on cobblestone. Emily used to love days like these. She'd pull me out of bed early, coffee in hand, to walk by the river, her hair tangled, cheeks pink from the cold. We'd share breakfast in crowded diners, laugh about nothing, trade dreams as if there would always be time for more. That feels like a different world now. On this particular morning, the sky is heavy, the kitchen window streaked with water. I stand by the stove, watching Emily dress for work. Black pencil skirt, a pale blue blouse, hair twisted up. She looks beautiful, sharp-edged in the light, and entirely unreachable. She moves around me like we're both ghosts, careful not to touch. I try to make small talk, ask about her schedule, offer to drive her to the station. She answers in half words, distracted, already gone. The ache in my chest grows sharper. I remember with a sting how she used to kiss me before leaving, how her fingers would linger on my wrist. Now her eyes slide past me to the phone on the table, screen flashing with a new message. I don't ask who it is. I tell myself not to care, but my hand trembles as I pour her coffee. "Thanks," she says, barely looking at me. "Big day?" I ask. She shrugs. "Just work." She leaves in a rush, door swinging shut behind her, her perfume lingering like a memory. Chapter 2. Before the Fall. There are days I try to remember the beginning. How easy it all felt, how effortless. We met at a bookshop in Cambridge. I was 26, fresh from a heartbreak, still clinging to the idea that love would just appear. Emily was behind the counter, recommending mysteries to an old man in a tweed hat. Her laugh was a revelation, warm, low, alive. When our eyes met, I smiled. She didn't smile back, not at first. But when I bought a battered copy of The Long Goodbye, she rung me up and wrote her number on the receipt. She said, "Don't lose it, or you'll never know who the killer is." Our first date was a rainy Tuesday, dinner at a tiny Thai place, then hours walking the city, trading stories. She told me she'd grown up in Maine, loved thunderstorms, hated the smell of bleach. She asked about my worst fear, and I told her, being ordinary. That night, we made love on her floor, surrounded by half-read books and empty wine glasses. I remember thinking, I could love her forever. For a while, I did. Chapter 3. Our Private World. The first years were a blur of shared adventures. Cheap flights, bad hotels, late-night promises. We fought about nothing and everything. Sometimes we'd shout, slam doors, then collapse in laughter at how dramatic we sounded. Emily had a temper, a wildness that pulled me out of myself. I was steadier, always ready to apologize first. Our apartment was always messy. Laundry draped over chairs, mugs everywhere. Max sprawled on the rug like a king. But it was ours. We hosted dinners for friends, played trivia at the dive bar down the street, built traditions. Sunday morning pancakes, movie marathons in winter, long drives with the windows down, singing badly to old Springsteen tracks. Looking back, I see now how I held on to those rituals like talismans, proof that we were still us, even as life pressed in from all sides. Chapter 4. The crack appears. The trouble started quietly. Emily's job at the marketing firm got more demanding. She started working late, traveling for team building, bringing her laptop to bed. At first, I didn't mind. I took on more chores, cooked dinner, left notes in her bag. I missed her, but I told myself she was just busy. But then came the secrets. The calls she took outside, the texts she typed with her phone angled away, the nights she came home smelling like hotel soap and strange cologne. I told myself I trusted her. But trust, I learned, is not a wall. It's a window. You see cracks if you look closely. One night, I found her crying in the shower. She said she was tired, that work was hard, that she just needed space. I held her until the water ran cold. Neither of us spoke.
Chapter 5. The Longest Night. Sometimes I dream about that night, how I lay awake beside her, listening to her breathe, wondering if I'd already lost her. I replay every detail. The way she flinched when I touched her shoulder, the way she turned away when I tried to kiss her, the quiet click of her phone, the glow of her screen under the covers. At 2 a.m., I got up and paced the apartment. Max followed, tail thumping, sensing my unrest. In the kitchen, I found her tablet charging. I stared at it for a long time, heart pounding. Finally, I picked it up, hands shaking. The password was the same as always. My birthday. That felt cruel. Inside, I found dozens of messages. Some innocent, her sister, her boss, old friends. But then, a name I didn't recognize. Dozens of texts. Jokes, late-night confessions, even a blurry photo of a hotel bar. My vision blurred. I scrolled back, reading, not wanting to know, unable to stop. When I finally crawled back into bed, Emily was asleep, curled away from me. I lay there until dawn, the city outside waking up, the ache in my chest a living thing. Chapter 6. The Weight of Secrets. That morning, the world looked the same. Gray sky, street car bells, the clatter of rain against the glass. But everything in me was different. Emily woke late. She moved quietly, careful not to disturb me, as if she already knew I'd been somewhere she didn't want me to be. We barely spoke over coffee. I tried to meet her eyes, but she looked everywhere but at me, fixing her hair in the hallway mirror, checking her phone twice in a minute. 1,000 questions burned on my tongue, but I couldn't form the words. Was I ready to admit what I'd seen? Was I brave enough to demand the truth? She left for work with a hurried goodbye. The apartment felt vast and cold, echoing with everything unsaid. I walked Max by the river. The city was full of couples, hands clasped, heads bent together, lost in their own stories. I wondered how many of them were living on the edge of the same unspoken cliff. How many pretended not to see what was right in front of them. I realized then, sometimes the only thing worse than being lied to is living as if you're not.
Chapter 7. Advice from the outside. I spent the day in a fog, drifting through work, answering emails and autopilot. At lunch, Mark called. "You sound like shit," he said, always the subtle one. "Didn't sleep," I admitted. He waited, and in that silence, I heard every reason I didn't want to say the words. Finally, I broke. "I think Emily's having an affair." There was a pause, then a sigh. "Are you sure?" "No, not really. But I saw messages, things I can't unsee." He didn't try to talk me down. Instead, he told a story, how his uncle, years ago, lost everything because he refused to believe his marriage was over. "You can't fix what you won't face," Mark said. "Find out the truth no matter how ugly. At least then you know where you stand." I wanted to argue, but he was right. That night, I sat in the living room, staring at Emily's empty chair, and made a decision that would change everything. Chapter 8. Crossing the Line. I searched for private investigators long after midnight, the glow of the laptop painting the walls in cold light. Most of the websites were shady, stock photos of men in hats, testimonials that sounded fake. But one site stood out, Evans and Associates. No melodrama, just a plain page, a photo of David, 30s, honest eyes, a gentle professional smile. I wrote and rewrote my message. "My wife has grown distant. I need to know if she's seeing someone. Discretion is everything." He replied within hours. "Happy to meet. No charge for a consult. Just facts, no assumptions." We arranged to meet the next day at a cafe near Harvard Square. Chapter 9. The Investigator. David looked even younger in person. No mustache, no sunglasses, just a gray sweater and a battered notebook. He listened as I explained, voice raw, hands shaking. He asked gentle questions. "How long have you felt this way? What's changed between you? What do you hope to find?" I surprised myself with the last answer. "I just want to know if there's something left to save." He nodded, made careful notes. "I'll be discreet. I'll send daily reports, and if you ever want to stop, just say so." He paused. "Sometimes the truth is a relief. Sometimes it's just the beginning." As I left, I wondered what Emily would think if she saw me now, paying a stranger to confirm what I already feared. Chapter 10. Shadows and Evidence. The first few days of surveillance were excruciating. David sent emails every evening, careful and detailed. Emily at work. Emily getting coffee with a friend I recognized. Emily at the gym, headphones in, alone. Sometimes David snapped a photo, a blurred image of her walking down Boylston, lost in thought. Each night I'd hover over my inbox, dreading and hoping for something I couldn't name. Emily noticed my nerves. She asked if I was sick, if work was hard. I almost laughed. "Just tired," I said, knowing it was the truest lie I'd ever told. One night, David's report was different. He said that She met a man for dinner, restaurant Red Lantern, sat together for almost 2 hours. No obvious signs of intimacy, but close. Conversation seemed private. He attached a photo. Emily, candlelit, leaning in, the man's hand on the table between them. My heart thundered, not with rage, but with a cold, bone-deep sadness. When Emily came home, I was sitting in the dark. She paused in a hallway, keys in hand, as if she could feel the tension. I wanted to ask her outright, but I couldn't. Instead, I listened to her footsteps fading down the hall, the door closing softly behind her. Chapter 11. Ghosts in the Bedroom. The house became a stage for silent performances. I watched Emily move through our routines, the rituals we'd built brick by brick. Dinner at 7, her favorite series on low volume, wine in the kitchen while Max waited for scraps under the table. But everything felt off. She'd smile, but her eyes were somewhere else. On her phone, on the wall behind me, anywhere but on us. I tried to pretend. I started making her favorite meals: risotto with mushrooms, chicken with rosemary, the lemon tart from the bakery down the street. She ate in small bites, eyes glancing up with thanks, then back to her screen. At night, we lay side by side but oceans apart, her back to me, my hand hovering in the empty space between us. Sometimes in the blue half-light, I'd reach out and brush her hair from her neck, just to remember what closeness felt like. Sometimes she'd sigh, tired, sad, or simply indifferent, and pull the blanket tighter around herself. I replayed our old nights, wild and breathless, when we couldn't keep our hands off each other. Now her body was a distant country, and I had no passport. Once I tried to bridge the distance. I traced my fingers down her spine, pressing soft kisses to her shoulder. She didn't pull away, but she didn't turn toward me either. She let me hold her, and I realized that's all it was, holding on. Not passion, not even comfort, just the weight of what we'd lost. I fell asleep that night with her hair tangled in my hand and dreamed of someone else in her place.
Chapter 12. The Man at the Red Lantern. For 3 days after David's report, I lived in a haze, part rage, part heartbreak, part numbness. I avoided Emily when I could. At work, I couldn't focus. I snapped at colleagues, ignored calls from my mother, and found myself daydreaming about running away to somewhere I didn't have to think about her, about us, about any of it. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I called David. "Do you know who he is?" I demanded, my voice low, almost a growl. David hesitated. I did some digging. Name's Anthony Rivers, works in finance. They went to college together. No signs of anything physical between them, but the dinners, they're frequent. They talk for hours. I pressed. "You're sure? Nothing happened?" His answer was careful. "Not that I've seen, but sometimes what matters isn't what people do, but how they look at each other." I hung up, not reassured, but too tired to argue. That night, I watched Emily sleep, her face peaceful, hair fanned out on the pillow like when we first met. I wondered if she dreamed of Anthony, or if she dreamed of being somewhere I wasn't. Chapter 13. Fraying Edges. The days blurred. I started inventing reasons to stay late at work. At home, I cleaned obsessively, wiping counters, rearranging bookshelves, anything to fill the silence. I thought if I could control my environment,
I could control the unraveling of my life. But secrets have a way of leaking into everything. One night, after a tense dinner, Emily stood by the window, swirling wine in her glass, eyes lost in the city lights. "Do you ever wish we could go back?" I asked quietly. She looked at me for a long moment, her face a mask of longing and regret. "Sometimes, but I don't know if that place even exists anymore." She set her glass down and left the room. I stood there, alone, watching her shadow retreat down the hallway, and realized I didn't know how to follow. Chapter 14. The Private Eye Grows Close. David's messages became less formal. He started texting late at night, small things, questions about Emily's favorite band, her favorite coffee shop, the kind of movies she liked. At first, I thought he was just being thorough. But then he started telling me stories, how Emily laughed at the barista's bad jokes, how she smiled at stray dogs, how she sat in the park alone and wrote in her journal, sunlight tangled in her hair. "She looks lonely," he wrote. "You can tell she's missing something." One day, he sent a photo. Emily, her face caught in a rare, unguarded laugh. The message read, "She's beautiful when she forgets to be sad." Jealousy prickled in my gut, not of Anthony, but of David, the stranger who saw my wife with new eyes. I wondered if I'd become so consumed by suspicion that I'd forgotten how to love her. Or maybe I'd never really known her at all. Chapter 15. The Night of Almost Truth. A week later, Emily came home late, hair windblown, cheeks flushed. "Got caught in the rain," she said, pulling off her shoes. We sat together at the kitchen table, a bottle of wine between us. For the first time in weeks, it felt like the old days, just us, no secrets. She talked about work, her colleagues, Anthony's recent engagement. I listened, heart pounding, searching for hidden meaning in every word. Finally, I asked, "Are you happy?" She froze, glass halfway to her lips. "What do you mean?" "Are you happy with us?" She looked down, tracing the rim of her glass with a finger. "I don't know. Sometimes I think I'm just lost. I keep waiting for things to feel right again, but I don't know how to get there." Her honesty was a knife. I wanted to ask her if she loved someone else, but I was afraid of the answer. That night, for the first time in months, she reached for me in bed. Her touch was desperate, almost frantic, a drowning woman searching for air. We made love in silence, bodies tangled in old routines, searching for comfort in the dark. Afterwards, she cried quietly, her face pressed into my chest. I held her, unable to speak, wondering if it was our last time. Chapter 16. The Investigator's Shadow. The following days, I found myself thinking about David as much as Emily. Every report he sent felt less like a professional update and more like a letter from someone quietly entering our lives. Sometimes he described things I'd never noticed myself, how Emily would linger on the bridge near Charles River tossing crumbs for the ducks, or how she'd stop to help a lost tourist with directions. He wrote, "She looks lonely sometimes. Does she always hum to herself when she walks the dog?" I read those lines over and over, searching for meaning, for hope, for something that told me I hadn't already lost her. What unsettled me most was how vivid David's words made her. I could see Emily through his eyes, softer, more fragile, a woman full of contradictions and half-healed wounds. He seemed to care about her in a way that stung. Wasn't that supposed to be my job? Jealousy crept in. Not just jealousy of a lover, but of a witness, of a man who noticed the details I'd let slip through the cracks of daily life. That night, I stared at Emily across the dinner table. watching the lamplight curve around her cheekbones, wishing I could find the words to ask what she needed. Instead, we ate in silence, listening to Max's paws tapping on the hardwood floor. Chapter 17. Surveillance of the Surveillance. One Friday night, when Emily told me she'd be working late, I decided I couldn't take the waiting anymore. I put Max's leash by the door as a cover, but really, I was going out to find answers, or maybe just to prove to myself I could still act instead of drifting through my own story. I parked across from Emily's office and waited, watching the streetlights flicker on. After a while, I noticed David. He was better at this than I was, fading into the crowd, watching from a bench with a notebook on his lap. Then Emily appeared, her face half hidden by her hair, clutching her bag. She walked briskly, barely glancing at the city around her, until she reached the river. That's when I saw David cross the street to catch up, matching her pace, his gestures easy and familiar. They talked for a while, standing near the railing. I couldn't hear their voices, but their postures were open, relaxed. Nothing like the tension at home. I drove home slowly. When I got there, Max greeted me, tail wagging, and I knelt down, burying my face in his fur, feeling more alone than I had in years.
Chapter 18. Temptations and Interference. The next morning, everything was brittle and sharp. Emily moved quietly around the kitchen, her gaze skimming off mine. "Are you okay?" she asked, voice tentative. I lied. "Just tired." At work, I couldn't focus. My coworker, Liz, noticed, her eyes full of concern. "Rough week?" she asked as we waited for coffee. I hesitated, then nodded. "You could say that." She offered to grab lunch together, and I agreed, grateful for the distraction. Over sandwiches in a crowded cafe, Liz talked about her own struggles, a broken engagement, a new apartment, the fear of starting over. Her honesty felt like a gift. I found myself opening up in return, careful but real. At one point, Liz reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Her touch was warm, grounding. For a moment, the possibility of something new flickered in my chest, a reminder that life might go on, with or without Emily. I pulled my hand away gently, guilt burning in my chest. That night, I lay awake, haunted by thoughts of both women, my wife, who felt like a stranger, and Liz, who felt dangerously familiar. Chapter 19. Letters to No One. I started writing again, something I hadn't done in years. Letters I'd never send, to Emily, to David, to myself. I wrote about fear, about longing, about the ache of living with someone you barely recognize. I wrote about the first time Emily and I made love, the way she laughed at my terrible jokes, the smell of her hair after rain. I wrote about all the things I never said, how lonely I'd been, how hard I'd tried to pretend everything was fine. Some nights I'd wake from dreams where I was searching for Emily in a crowd, only to see her walk away with someone else. I filled pages with confessions and regrets, then tore them up and flushed the scraps down the sink. It was easier than telling the truth out loud.
Chapter 20. A Conversation Without Masks. On Saturday morning, Emily and I cooked breakfast together, something we hadn't done in months. She watched me as I chopped onions, a strange look on her face. Finally, she spoke. "We can't keep doing this, can we?" I set down the knife. "Doing what?" "This. Pretending. Acting like things are fine when they're not." I wanted to argue, to say I was trying, but the words caught in my throat. Emily took a deep breath. "I haven't cheated on you. Not the way you think, but I feel lost. like I don't know who I am anymore. I stared at her, heart pounding. And David? She shrugged. He's just someone who listened. Someone who didn't expect me to be anything but honest. Silence fell, heavy as thunder. I wish you'd talk to me, my voice cracking. Emily's eyes filled with tears. I didn't think you wanted to hear it. I didn't think you saw me anymore. We stood in the kitchen, the smell of burnt toast curling around us, and for the first time in years, I realized how far we drifted. Not because of a stranger, but because of everything we left unsaid. Chapter 21. The Confession. That evening, the sky was the color of pewter, and the city lights bled across puddles on the street outside our apartment. Emily sat curled on the sofa, knees pulled to her chest, watching a rerun of a sitcom we once loved. I lingered in the doorway, Max at my feet, the air heavy with everything unspoken. I sat beside her, unsure where to start. For a while, we watched the TV in silence, two ghosts occupying the same room. Finally, I spoke. I know you haven't been yourself. I know you've been hurting. I should have asked sooner. I should have tried harder. She stared at the screen, blinking back tears. It's not all your fault, she said softly. I let it happen too. I kept thinking if I waited long enough, I'd become the person I used to be. But I can't. I'm tired of pretending. I took her hand. It felt small and cold, the way it had the night my father died, when she held me until sunrise. We lost ourselves. Not because of Anthony, or David, or anyone else. Just being afraid to say the things that mattered. She nodded. Are we too late? I squeezed her fingers, my own eyes stinging. I don't know. Maybe. But I don't want to hate you. I don't want to be angry anymore. Max whimpered softly, pressing his nose into Emily's side. She reached down, burying her fingers in his fur. I loved you. I still do. But I don't think it's enough anymore. For a moment, the only sound was the laugh track from the television. Then Emily stood, wiped her cheeks, and left the room. I watched her go, feeling both relief and sorrow twisting together in my chest.
Chapter 22. A Night with Liz. It rained hard that night, drumming against the window panes and pooling on the balcony outside. Sleep was impossible. I paced the dark apartment, turning over everything Emily had said. A message buzzed on my phone. Liz. You awake? I hesitated, then typed back, Yeah, can't sleep. She suggested we meet at a nearby bar, neutral ground, somewhere anonymous. I left without telling Emily, the cold air shocking my skin as I hurried through the downpour. Liz was already there, nursing a whiskey, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. She smiled when she saw me, and for the first time in days, I felt something loosen inside me. We talked for hours about work, about families, about all the little disappointments that pile up when you're trying to be strong. At one point, Liz touched my arm, her eyes lingering on mine. She asked, Are you okay? I thought about lying, but I was too tired for that. No, but I want to be. She smiled, sad and sweet. You will. Maybe not tonight, but
someday. Later, as we walked out into the rain, she squeezed my hand. For a moment, I let myself imagine what it would be like to let go of the past, to start something new. But when Liz leaned in, I hesitated. Her lips brushed my cheek, gentle, respectful, and she pulled away without a word. We stood in the rain, two people on the edge of something they both wanted and weren't ready for. Chapter 23. David's Truth. A few days later, I got a message from David. He wanted to meet. Just once, to clear the air. I agreed, curiosity and dread swirling in my chest. We met in a quiet park, the city buzzing distantly beyond the trees. David looked tired, almost apologetic. "I owe you an explanation," he said, voice low. "I crossed lines. I know I did. But I swear nothing happened between Emily and me. We talked. We shared coffee. I listened to her the way maybe you used to, but I never touched her." I believed him. He continued, "Sometimes you see people trying so hard to hold on that they end up pushing each other away. I watched you both, so close to loving each other again, so afraid to say what you felt." He handed me his last report. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. "I'm done with all this. I have to be." David nodded, relief softening his features. "Take care of yourself. Both of you." We shook hands. Two men who knew too much about each other, who would probably never speak again.
Chapter 24. The Final Goodbye. Emily and I spent the next week in a strange kind of truce. We moved around each other carefully, kind but distant. Sometimes we talked about splitting up, who would keep Max, who would move out, how we would tell our friends. One night, we sat on the balcony, wrapped in blankets, watching the city below. "Will you be okay?" I asked. She nodded. "I think so. I need to find out who I am without you. Maybe you need that too." I thought of Liz, of the gentle promise in her eyes, and realized she was right. The next morning, Emily packed her things. She kissed Max, hugged me tightly, and whispered, "Thank you for everything, even the hard parts." And then she was gone. Chapter 25. Starting Over. The apartment felt bigger after Emily left, quieter, lonelier, but also full of possibility. I spent the first few days cleaning, rearranging, rediscovering spaces that had been lost in the mess of our unraveling. Max stayed close, his presence grounding. I started writing again, real writing, not just letters to no one. I went for long walks, sometimes with Liz, sometimes alone. We didn't rush anything, didn't name what was happening between us. At night, I lay in bed, listening to the city, remembering the good days as well as the bad. I realized I didn't hate Emily. I didn't even hate David. The story we lived was full of mistakes, but also moments of real love. Epilogue. Lessons learned. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Love isn't always enough. Trust can break, and even the deepest bonds can fray and snap under the weight of silence. But letting go isn't failure. Sometimes it's the bravest thing you can do.
Sometimes starting over is the only way to find yourself again. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough.